Florida versus number 1, Georgia.
So this is also a huge spread. Georgia favored by 23 in this neutral site affair, and that's where I'll start. So it's neutral site, but you heard Kirby Smart this week talk about, I don't know what it means for Gainesville. I don't know what it means for Jacksonville. I don't know what it means for Athens. Let me just be on the record for saying this. I believe that college football games should be played on campus. There's only 2 college football games that I really firmly believe should be played in a neutral site. And I'm talking about regular season games, okay? I understand about conference championship games, and I even understand about, obviously bowls and then moving forward in the playoffs, although I'll get to that in a moment. Neutral site games, to me, I don't love them. I played in them. We played Colorado State down in Mile High in Denver. I liked playing on campus. I like going to campus. I want to see teams have a home field advantage and have to go on the road and get tested. I think that's better for the sport, to be quite honest with you. Part of what makes college football so unique and so great is the organic nature of it. And part of the organic nature of it is that we don't go to stale corporate environments. The environments are amazing, right? It's like going home, and I like it on campus. Now, you can disagree, and you can say that it's great in Jacksonville. The 2 games that I believe should and will stay neutral site moving forward are Red River between Oklahoma and Texas, and it's because of the unique element of the state fair, and they're not in an NFL stadium, and then Army-Navy, because Army-Navy is one of my favorite games of all time, and that one's just pure Americana. I want both sides. I want the cadets of each there. I want the flyovers. I want the march in. I want it all, right? That one clearly to me is a neutral. I think Red River, clearly a neutral. Everything else in the regular season should be played on campus, and I think this one is in that same boat. Now, some disagree. That's fine. As it pertains to the game, Florida has lost 7 of their last 8 in the SEC, and Richardson has been a shell of what he was against Utah ever since then. He just doesn't throw the ball well. Right? He turns it over too much. He's only got 6 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. And because of that, I just have a really hard time believing that Florida's going to be able to jump enough offense against this Georgia defense to win the game. I think Georgia's going to win this one, and they're going to win it pretty handily. Georgia, since that, I don't know what you want to call it, snafu, right? What do you want to call it? Since their poor play against Missouri, they've been outstanding. In the last 2 games, they've been absolutely dominant. They have been what we would require out of the number 1 team in the country. They have beaten, albeit not great teams, Auburn and Vandy, but they've done exactly what they should do in those 2 games. They've outgained them 1,079 to 407. They've outscored them well over 90 to 10. The defense is playing really well. In fact, right now, their scoring defense is at a better mark than what they finished the year last year with, and they had all of those draft picks last year. The Florida defense gave up 45 points and 528 yards to LSU. This is not a particularly close game. I just don't think Florida is that good. Maybe the rivalry aspect of this allows them to play better, but this is a game that Georgia is going to win and win handily. Now, I will say, I do think Florida is going to cover the 23 because that's a huge number. That's a huge number. And in a rivalry game, I just feel like they will play better than I expect them to play. So I think Florida covers the 23, but Georgia wins comfortably, probably right there at that 20-21 mark, maybe a 3-touchdown game. Maybe Florida sneaks one in late and ends up covering that 23. All right, next up.
Number 19, Kentucky at number 3, Tennessee.
So this is a classic look ahead, and by the way, I should have mentioned that also for Georgia because we are on the eve, right, the weekend eve of what is becoming kind of this season's game of the century, at least early in the season, because clearly the Michigan-Ohio State game late, I think, is going to be the marquee game of the year. Tennessee is favored by 13. Tennessee beat this Kentucky team a year ago. It was a close game. And there's some interesting elements to this game that I think that you will agree with me. Number 1, Kentucky, 9th in the country in scoring defense. Well, that's interesting because I know that Tennessee's not great on defense. So is there a path to a Will Levis Hendon Hooker shootout? I think that that's possible. Levis played really well against this Tennessee team, a year ago. And Tennessee, in turn, was one of the more successful teams during last season, and throwing the ball against Kentucky. Hendon Hooker threw it for 316 yards in that game against Kentucky. There was only one other team that threw for more yards against the Wildcat, and that was Mississippi State. And so you have to kind of throw that out because, remember, just the sheer volume of what Mike Leach is going to throw out there. Just to give you a sense, like Tennessee was throwing it for, I think well over 14 yards per attempt to get that 316 yards, while Mississippi State was down in like the 8.5 yards per attempt. So it was just a different style of game, and that's kind of obvious with Mike Leach. So you could say that Tennessee was the most successful team throwing the ball against this Kentucky defense. This will probably continue. Why? Well, because that was really the first game that gave Hendon Hooker a lot of confidence. It was the first game at Tennessee in which he threw for over 300 yards. He had thrown for 300 yards before in his career, but only once, and it was a game against Virginia before he had transferred. So now you've got this success that he gets, and it's really the first game that he has that success as the quarterback of the Vols. And since then, this Volunteer team has really taken off. I believe that was a game that really sparked something within that program, within Hendon Hooker, within the coaching staff. Since then, they're 9-2. He's had 4 300-yard games since, and they're sitting there with a win over Alabama, and they're on the weekend eve of the biggest game in Tennessee history, back to, the national championship game with T. Martin. That's where I think it is. Now, Tennessee is favored by 13. I think that's a big number. Because Kentucky does enough on defense, even though Hooker has had the success, and Will Levis has some history of playing well against this Tennessee team. So I think the 13 is too big of a number, but Tennessee is going to win the game. Remember, it's got the look-ahead deal. There's some elements here that even at home, I don't know if they're going to play, out of sight like they have in other games, in particular throwing the ball, but Tennessee is going to win. They're going to set up that matchup for next week, but I think Kentucky covers the 13.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here, College Football on Fox.